You know, Dominic, you covered this when broken windows came into place. And it's funny, when you hear Rudy explain the rationale behind it, let's not forget Bratton was, you know, his commissioner at the time, the same commissioner we have now.
That's right.
I hear what everyone's saying, and even the state senator and others are saying, oh, you can have this, you can have stop and frisk, but you can't do it wrong. Can you really have it both ways, though? Because if you're saying to an officer, use it, but use it with discretion, discretion means two different things to two different people. And I take the same Staten Island situation. Eric Garner's a big guy, 400 pounds. Now, I don't think any of us think that the chokehold and what happened after it fit what that guy did. You know, it didn't match up. But let's say it was one cop. And let's say, again, he resisted arrest and he's trying to detain him and the guy's not going down. There's so many different ways this thing can play out, and the two people can look at it and say, well, you know what, this is a community crime, and this is how you stop things like Rudy said. Or, you know what, stop and frisk, you got to know who's in your neighborhood. Either you don't have the policies and you live with the consequences, or you have the policies and you live with the consequences where it goes overboard. Can you have it both ways?
I don't know. That's an excellent question. Here's the problem, Richard, and I'm going to be very frank about this. People of color only see people of color that are shot, detained, arrested by NYPD. And so people of color, even people that are good people, they don't see other races being treated like this by the police. So that's where the problem stems at. You can call it broken windows, you can call it la-di-da. Until you change the perception of police officers that don't live in these communities, that are scared to death, coming into these communities, they don't know how to deal with these black youngsters. And I'll admit, you know, some of these kids walking around with the jeans hanging down and the baggy clothes, if I'm a detective, I don't know what they have.
But also, let's be clear, when they're talking about broken windows, the quality of life, the squeegee guys or whatever, sure, there was some of that when people were getting on the FDR or the West Side, but there was a lot in also inner city communities and stuff.
It's a lot in the entire city.
Well, absolutely. Is there a little bit of an internal conflict in some of these minority communities that say, if we get rid of these policies, they're not going to show their faces around here unless there's gunfire and everything else, and we want a police presence? Is there a balance that says, you know, we don't want the hassling that they're not doing to some of the folks in Midtown that they're doing here, but is that part of the compact to keep these places safe?
Richard, the problem is, and this goes back to former police commissioner Howard Safer, everyone wants to be respected. And here's the problem. I said I'm going to be honest, I'm going to tell it the other way. You look at the stats, black folks and some Latino folks are committing crime. So NYPD goes, see, we're not racist. 81% of blacks committing crime. But then you stop, let's say Andrew's an African American. He's walking up the street with a suit on. He's thrown up on the wall. How do you justify that? That's where the problem lies. And the state senator was right about Sharpton. You can hate Sharpton all you want, but he represents a sickness, a problem.
Yeah.
And this is nothing new.
I will only tell you, Andrew, we've gone through this round and round on the Sharpton thing, but listen, Lynch was doing his job here, but the optics, where Sharpton's basically saying, okay, medical examiner report came back, I now have what I need. You're going to do indictments. I want to see them done here. I'm going to have the feds get involved here. If his threshold isn't met, justice hasn't been served. I think the mayor and the police commissioner, maybe they didn't have a choice, but they've elevated him where they have to check with him to see if they're proceeding quickly enough and with enough due diligence. And that's never a good standard here if you're trying to run the city.
You know, you may not like him, you may not like his history or what he represents in terms of being a black vocal spokesman or for the black community,
to be
for
clear,
minority communities
I
in New
don't
York City.
forgive or forget the Brawley thing where he played the race card and destroyed people with no facts.
I understand that, but he is where he is today, and he's in that position today, and this is a racially divisive issue, and there are members of the minority community of New York City who are upset about these policies, and so he finds voice, and they give him their voice.
I agree, but do you think the mayor has elevated him too much, that he has a risk now?
I don't think so. I think he would still be a vocal thorn in the mayor's side if the mayor didn't invite him in for the conversation, and he'd be dealing with him from the outside looking in, just in the form of protest.
I agree, but just think Bloomberg. We obviously know Rudy would, but even Bloomberg wouldn't have elevated him. It wouldn't be Ray Kelly, Bloomberg, and Al Sharpton at the same table.
But Bloomberg dealt with him.
He did,
okay?
but I'm saying publicly now.
Okay. No,
right?
I'm talking about publicly as well. Bloomberg.
You wouldn't have done what de Blasio did,
Okay.
where he literally sits next to him, puts him in between him and the commissioner.
But no, de Blasio went from 4th in the mayor's race to 1st and won. No, let me just give you this one example. So here's what people of color see.
It has nothing to do with Dante's afro as it did with Reverend Al selling out Bill.
Okay, well, without Sharpton, de Blasio wouldn't be mayor, period. But let me just make this one point. Over the weekend, the video surfaces on the Daily News. I don't know the details of the case, but we know the pictures.
Yeah.
An African-American woman, apparently the police went to the wrong apartment, a call, and the black woman is in the hallway with no bra on, and there are like 10 white cops, and they're standing there, and they're all just looking at her. Now, Richard, how can one, and the video we're looking at now is another African-American woman who was arrested. This is the front of her house. She was barbecuing in the front of her own house, and she's pregnant. Now, Richard, do you really believe, with all candid and all due respect, do you really believe the police department would do this to white people? Do you really believe that?
I don't think so. I certainly don't think the numbers.
There would be a lawsuit overnight. It would stop overnight.
Right.
It would stop overnight. Why is a black woman in the hallway with no bra on and her breasts are exposed and there are 10 white cops just looking at her? And no one covers her until a female officer arrives on the scene and gives her... At this point,
I would love to go to commercial break. And
okay,
because I'm
that's
right
fair
now,
enough. That's fair enough.
I understand, though, on a more serious level, the point. I just think that we're going to go round and round on this, right? On broken windows, on stop and frisk. If you have this policy, and whenever it's convenient, either you say get rid of the policy, and maybe that's what we ought to do with stop and frisk.
But it's not the policy, Richard. You can call it whatever you want. Imagine a white woman with no bra on and 10 cops standing in the hallway, and she's just standing there with her breasts.
I agree with Dominic. I just made a little list here as we were going through this. Broken windows, stop and frisk, marijuana arrests, prison rates, and if you go outside of New York, the death penalty, all disproportionately target and impact people of color as opposed to white.
I agree.
Americans.
I'm just saying, I hate things where you keep going in circles on this. Everyone wants to rightfully get upset about this case, and I'm with you on this. But if you keep the same policies and then act surprised when some cop thinks he's using discretion and the other one isn't.
You can call a policy la-di-da. It's still going to be the same premise.
Make your opinion heard. Go to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question. Broken windows. Is it good policing? Just a little tweaking is all that's necessary. You got to scrap it all together. All right. When we come back, we will head to Rikers Island, where tonight there is another gruesome report shining a dark light on what appears to be a broken prison system. This time, we're going to shift our focus from the abuse of the mentally ill inmates to this time, abuse of minors who are behind bars.